I've experienced war. I've seen it firsthand, and I hate it with every fiber of my being. And I believe that we have a duty and responsibility as warriors to ensure that before we send young men and women off to fight and die for a cause, that we make sure that that cause is worthy of the sacrifice we're asking them to make, and that we have exhausted all means possible short of war to prevent war, to solve this problem, in another way. So when I see somebody like Lindsey Graham just up there, literally foaming at the mouth, promoting war, he sickens me. And Tom Cotton sickens me. All the warmongers out there sicken me.
Welcome to today's Battlefield Report, where we dive deep into the latest developments on the ever-shifting front lines. As tensions between Ukraine and Russia escalate, the situation along the border has become increasingly volatile. Scott Ritter has consistently warned about the growing unpredictability of this conflict. His insights remind us how fragile and dangerous this situation has become, especially with Ukrainian forces now making bold moves into Russian territory. The intensity of the clashes we're witnessing today could reshape the dynamics of this ongoing war. But the question remains, how far will this escalation go? And where will the next moves be made? As we delve deeper, we'll uncover the calculated risks and potential flashpoints in this volatile situation. Let's look closer at the front lines. Just yesterday, a Ukrainian force of approximately 200 men, supported by armored vehicles and heavy artillery, initiated a daring cross-border incursion into Russian territory near the village of Kromon. This incursion was no ordinary skirmish. It was a well-coordinated assault that included the use of advanced HIMARS missile systems, delivering a powerful punch to Russian positions. However, the Russian forces were quick to respond. With a combination of air and ground counterattacks, they managed to destroy the leading elements of the Ukrainian force, forcing the remaining troops to retreat in disarray. The speed and decisiveness of the Russian response raised critical questions about the readiness and resilience of both sides in this conflict. But this confrontation, intense as it was, may only be the beginning. The fact that such an incursion occurred indicates a level of desperation or perhaps a bold strategic gamble by Ukrainian forces. What does this mean for the broader conflict? Could it signal a shift in tactics, or is it a feint to divert Russian attention from other critical areas? While the initial attack was repelled, Ukrainian forces are not backing down. This incident is a microcosm of the larger, more complex military buildup happening along the border. Let's take a broader look at the forces at play and what they might signify. As Inspector Scott Ritter has previously emphasized, one of the key elements of modern warfare is deception. Across three critical border regions, Bryansk, Sumy, and Belgorod, Ukrainian military activity has surged to unprecedented levels. This is no isolated incident, it's a comprehensive buildup that signals potential large-scale offensives. Currently, up to 30% of Ukraine's total military forces, potentially numbering between 30,000 and 50,000 troops, are massing along these borders. The scale and concentration of these forces are significant, as they represent a major portion of Ukraine's available combat power, but what exactly are they preparing for? Is this the prelude to a multi-pronged offensive aimed at breaking through Russian defenses, or is it a strategic positioning to force Russia into a more reactive posture? This buildup isn't just about numbers, it's about positioning. The regions of Bryansk, Sumy, and Belgorod form a strategic triangle, where any shift in control could significantly alter the balance of power. The concentration of such a significant portion of Ukraine's military resources here suggests that something big is on the horizon. Whether it's a major offensive, a defensive posture, or a feint to draw Russian forces away from other critical areas remains to be seen. However, the presence of so many troops in these regions is a clear signal that Ukraine is preparing for something far larger than what we've seen so far. The buildup continues, and as we watch these forces gather, we must consider the potential flashpoints that could trigger the next major confrontation. Let's now turn our attention to the New York and Toretsk regions, where the situation remains equally volatile. In the New York region, Russian forces have made a slight yet significant advance westward from the village of Ulivka. While the progress here has been slow, it underscores the methodical approach that Russian forces are taking in this area. The central and left flanks remain relatively quiet, with no significant movements reported. However, on the right flank, near Druzhba, Russian troops have seized control of multiple strategic buildings, tightening their grip on this crucial area. This area, while not the most heavily contested, represents a critical junction in the broader conflict. The quiet on the left and central flanks may be deceiving, as it could indicate that Russian forces are consolidating their positions before launching a more comprehensive offensive. The capture of buildings in Druzhba is particularly noteworthy, as it suggests that Russian forces are not only holding their ground, but are also preparing to launch further operations to secure this sector. The question is, how will Ukrainian forces respond? Will they attempt to retake these positions, or will they focus their efforts elsewhere? As the battle intensifies at Druzhba, the focus shifts to the south, where Russian forces are laying the groundwork for a potentially decisive offensive in the Klishchivka and Kostiantynivka regions. Further south, in Klishchivka, Russian forces have made significant gains, capturing an additional 1 square kilometer of territory. This may seem like a small step, but in the context of the ongoing conflict, it's a critical move that could set the stage for a much larger offensive. The capture of this area is not just about territorial control. It's about establishing a foothold for future operations aimed at the strategically vital city of Kostiantynivka. The broader strategy appears to be a multi-directional pressure campaign, with Russian forces advancing from Druzhba, Kharkiv, and Ozerinivka, effectively squeezing Ukrainian defenses from multiple angles. The significance of these movements cannot be overstated. By advancing in this manner, Russian forces are not only gaining ground, but are also forcing Ukrainian troops into increasingly untenable defensive positions. The ultimate objective seems clear: to encircle and isolate Kostiantynivka, cutting off a key supply and communication hub for Ukrainian forces. If successful, this operation could severely weaken Ukraine's ability to sustain its defense in this region and could pave the way for further Russian advances into the heart of Ukrainian-held territory. The stakes are high in Klishchivka, but the situation is equally critical further east, where Russian forces continue their methodical advance near Sloviansk and Siversk. Let's examine the situation there. Inspector Scott Ritter, in his detailed analyses, has often highlighted the importance of these eastern regions in determining the long-term outcome of the war. In the Sloviansk and Siversk areas, Russian forces have maintained a steady offensive, despite occasional pauses in the fighting. These intermittent pauses may be part of a larger strategy aimed at pinning down Ukrainian forces, forcing them to commit resources to this front, while preventing reinforcements from being sent to more critical areas. The pressure is constant, and while the gains may appear slow, the cumulative effect of these operations is beginning to strain Ukrainian defenses. This strategy of attrition is a hallmark of Russian military doctrine, and we are seeing it play out in real time along these eastern front lines. The goal is not necessarily to achieve rapid gains, but to wear down the enemy over time, forcing them to exhaust their resources and morale. As Russian forces continue to probe Ukrainian defenses, the question remains: how long can Ukraine hold out under this relentless pressure? And where will the next major breakthrough occur? As the Eastern Front continues to heat up, let's turn our attention once again to the north, where the situation near Stelmakivka and Pishchain remains highly fluid. In the Stelmakivka-Pishchain area, Russian forces are playing a careful game of cat and mouse with Ukrainian defenders. Despite having the upper hand in terms of terrain and positioning, Russian forces have yet to fully capitalize on the situation. This delay may be part of a broader strategy designed to confuse and mislead Ukrainian forces, drawing them into areas where they are less effective while preserving Russian strength for more decisive engagements elsewhere. The threat of a major offensive remains ever present, and Ukrainian forces are being forced to commit valuable resources to defend against an attack that may or may not come. This type of psychological warfare is as old as conflict itself. By keeping Ukrainian forces guessing, Russian commanders are able to dictate the pace and nature of the fighting. The longer Ukraine is forced to defend these positions, the fewer resources they will have available to launch offensives elsewhere. The question now is whether Russia will capitalize on this strategic advantage and launch a full-scale offensive, or whether they will continue to play this waiting game, forcing Ukraine to spread its forces thinner and thinner across the front. As Russian forces continue to tighten their grip in the north, let's explore the broader implications of these movements and what they mean for the conflict as a whole. As we assess the unfolding battle across multiple fronts, one thing is clear: the Russian military strategy is one of pressure, deception, and methodical advance. Inspector Scott Ritter has long emphasized the importance of these tactics, and we are seeing them play out on a grand scale. Whether it's the slow but steady progress in Druzhba, the larger offensive in Klishchivka, or the ongoing battles near Sloviansk and Siversk, the Russian approach remains consistent. By keeping Ukrainian forces spread thin and guessing about their next moves, Russia is creating the conditions for a potential breakthrough on multiple fronts. And that concludes today's update on the front lines. The situation is fluid and developments are ongoing, but one thing is certain: the battle is far from over. Inspector Scott Ritter's warnings about the escalation of this conflict resonate louder with each passing day. Stay tuned for more in-depth coverage as we continue to monitor these critical developments. Until next time, this has been your Frontline Report.